The anniversary vacation ruined by my wife's affair. A story of betrayal and heartbreak. Hey, I'm Mark. I'm 36, and I've been married to Emily for 8 years. We met in college and have been together ever since. Our relationship hasn't been perfect, but that's normal for any couple. We've had our ups and downs, but after all this time, we're stronger than ever. Last year, for our 8-year anniversary, I wanted to surprise Emily. We were planning to go to the coast for our vacation, so I booked a trip to this amazing beach resort in California. It was going to be our first vacation in a long time, and I wanted to make it special. We had all these plans: romantic dinners, walks on the beach at sunset, and even a special anniversary cruise. I wanted this trip to be perfect, and it was the best vacation we'd ever had. We arrived at the resort on Friday, and it was absolutely gorgeous. Palm trees swaying in the breeze, waves crashing on the beach. Everything was just like Emily had always dreamed. She was so happy and excited. We spent the first day just relaxing by the pool, drinking cocktails and enjoying the vibes. Everything seemed so normal and great. But then, the next day something changed. Emily is usually super social and loves meeting new people, so it wasn't surprising when she started chatting with this guy named Jason at the pool. He was around our age and staying there with friends, so we weren't too worried at first. I trusted Emily's judgment, and we were on vacation after all, so I tried not to be too jealous or suspicious. So the three of us were hanging out and having a chat for a while. Jason seemed like a pretty cool guy. He was kind of friendly, maybe a bit too friendly, but I went with it. Later that night, Emily suggested we all go grab a drink at the hotel bar. I wasn't really into the idea, but didn't want to seem like a jealous partner, so I went along. At the bar, though, Jason was paying more attention to Emily than me. He laughed at everything she said, complimented her constantly, her hair, her dress, you name it, and kept buying her drinks. Emily seemed to be enjoying the attention too, laughing more and smiling more. I started to feel a bit uncomfortable, but told myself I was overthinking it. We were on vacation, right? It's supposed to be fun. By the end of the night, Emily had clearly been drinking and Jason showed no sign of leaving. I suggested we head back to the hotel room, but she insisted on staying out a little longer. She convinced me to go back by myself, saying she just wanted to hang out a bit more. She promised to come back soon, and being a fool, I trusted her. I went back to the room, but couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that something wasn't right. An hour went by, and then 2. I texted Emily asking when she'd be back, but got no reply. I called her, but it went straight to voicemail. My mind started racing with different scenarios. I told myself she was just enjoying herself and would be back any minute. But as the hours went by, I realized something serious was wrong. It was like 3:00 when I realized I needed to find her. I went back to the bar, but it was dead. The whole place was quiet, and I had no clue where she could have gone. I was about to head back to my room when suddenly there was Jason leaning against the pool wall, smoking a cig. I walked up to him and asked where Emily was, but he just shrugged and gave me a smile, like he couldn't care less. "Relax," he said. "She's probably just taking a breather somewhere." His calm attitude pissed me off. Instead of getting into it with him, I decided to spend the next hour looking around the resort. Checked the beach, pool area, even the lobby, but there was no trace of her. My mind was racing with thoughts of where she could have gone. All of them were negative. I headed back to our room, thinking maybe she'd be there, but still nothing. It was almost 5 a.m. when she finally stumbled in the door, looking like a wreck. Her hair was all tangled up, her dress wrinkled and messed up, and she reeked of alcohol. I knew something had happened right away and confronted her. She gave a vague excuse, saying she lost track of time and just talked, but I could tell she was hiding something. That night, I let it go because I was exhausted and scared of what she might say. Deep down, though, I knew the truth. The anniversary trip we planned to strengthen our relationship turned into a disaster, and it was the start of our problems. The next morning, after Emily had crashed in our room, I woke up feeling like I'd been hit by a bus. My mind was racing with thoughts of the night before, and there was this deep ache in my chest, like nothing I'd ever felt before. I kept replaying that moment when she walked into the room, her messy appearance, the smell of booze, and her vague, evasive answers. Emily was still sleeping when I got up, and needed some fresh air to clear my head. I went down to the beach, hoping the sound of waves would help me think, but no matter how much I tried to tell myself that things were okay, I just couldn't shake that feeling that something was wrong. After an hour of walking along the shore, I decided it was time to head back to the room. When I got back, Emily was sitting on the edge of her bed, looking at her phone. She didn't even look sorry or apologetic, just this cold, indifferent expression that cut me deeper than any words could have. I sat across from Emily, and the silence between us was heavy. I finally spoke. "Where were you last night, Emily?" My voice sounded steady, but my hands were shaking. She wouldn't meet my eyes and said, "I was with Jason and friends. We just lost track of time." Her words sounded rehearsed, like she'd already thought of a lie. But it didn't make sense. Why would anyone stay out till 5 a.m. just talking? And where was Jason when I saw him? "There's more to the story," I said more firmly. "I saw Jason by the pool last night." "Where were you?" "If you were with him." She hesitated, then finally looked at me. "Mark, I didn't do anything wrong. You're overreacting. We're on vacation, and I just wanted to have fun." My heart sank. I felt like she was trying to gaslight me, make it seem like there was something wrong with me. I wanted to trust her, but something inside me told me there was something off. Fun. Emily came home at 5 a.m., drunk as a skunk, and looked like she'd been through the ringer. I didn't know what to say, man. I wasn't even sure if I wanted to know. She got all defensive, crossing her arms and saying she needed some space. I knew it was time to back off, give her some breathing room. I've always tried to be protective, but maybe I've been a bit overbearing. She's got a point. Maybe I should let her do her own thing sometimes. It's not like she doesn't have a life outside our relationship. But this isn't the first time she's accused me of smothering her. Maybe she just needs some time to cool down. The conversation ended abruptly. She stormed off to the bathroom. I sat there, trying to figure out what went wrong. My gut told me something was up. Maybe she crossed a line, but I can't be sure. As the day went on, tension stayed between us. We did the usual things, breakfast at the resort cafe, walk on the beach, but it felt more like we were strangers, not a couple celebrating our anniversary. Emily didn't want to talk about the night before, and I didn't push it. I wanted to confront her, but I was scared of what would happen if I did. That night, things got worse. Emily got a text while we were by the pool. I saw her look at her phone, and her face change for a second before she turned away from me. I noticed the change in her. My heart raced with curiosity. Who was she texting, and why did she hide it from me? I was just being curious, While Emily was getting drinks at the bar, I couldn't help but check her phone. I mean, we've always been honest with each other, right? But as I unlocked it, my hands were shaking. I knew it was wrong, but I had to know. I scrolled through her texts, and there it was, Jason. They'd been texting back and forth all week, starting out with lighthearted stuff. But then it took a more serious turn. "Last night was so much fun. Can't stop thinking about you," he said. And her reply made my stomach drop. "Me too. Can't wait to see you tonight," she responded. My world started to crumble. There it was, confirmed on the screen. She was planning to meet up with him again. Our anniversary trip turned into a complete betrayal, and it didn't bring us closer at all. When Emily came back with the drinks, she could tell something was up. She noticed my face and froze, her smile fading. "Mark, what the hell are you doing with my phone?" she asked, her voice shaking. I handed her the phone with Jason's text still open and watched as all the color drained out of her face. I saw a hint of guilt in her eyes for the first time, but it was too late. The moment I gave Emily her phone back and watched her face change, the world seemed to come crashing down around me. She stared at the screen for a few seconds in disbelief, not knowing what to make of what she was seeing. It was like the truth had just slapped her in the face. "Mark?" she stuttered, her voice barely above a whisper. I stood there, feeling anger and hurt boiling inside me. I didn't want to hear any excuses. "Don't bother trying to explain, Emily. I already know what's going on." She looked back and forth between me and her phone, trying to figure out what to do. But there wasn't anything she could say. The truth was out, and I wanted her to admit it. That was the least I deserved. "You've been messaging Jason all this time? Last night wasn't enough for you, huh? You were going to see him again, weren't you?" My voice got louder as I got more angry and betrayed. Emily didn't respond right away. She stared at the ground, hands shaking as she gripped her phone. "It's not what you think," she said finally, her voice breaking. "What do you mean it's not what I think? I can't believe what I'm hearing. You were sneaking around behind my back, and you have the audacity to tell me that it's not what I think. Do you think I'm an idiot?" Tears started to well up in her eyes, but she wasn't sure if they were from guilt or just frustration at getting caught. "Mark, I didn't want this to happen. I didn't know how it even started. It happened. I wasn't thinking straight." "That's an excuse, right? You weren't thinking either?" You knew what you were doing when you were out until 5 a.m. When you were lying to me, when you sent that text today. Emily, she wiped at her eyes and for the first time met my gaze. I'm so sorry, Mark, she said. I really am. I didn't mean to hurt you. It was never my intention, but it was too late for apologies. The damage was done, and nothing we said would change what happened. I felt sick to my stomach, like I'd been hit with a punch. After 8 years of marriage, everything had fallen apart. I planned the trip to bring us closer, to celebrate our love, but we were more apart than ever before. Why, Emily? I asked. How did this happen? Why did you do this to me? She looked down, defeated. I don't know, she whispered. I feel disconnected. I don't know if it's just me, or our relationship, or life in general. Something felt different when I met Jason. There was a spark I hadn't felt in a long time. Her words really hurt me. She wasn't just saying she cheated. She was saying that, somewhere along the line, she lost the connection between us. It was like everything I'd been afraid of about our relationship was happening at once. Different? A spark? I asked, my voice full of disbelief. You threw away our whole marriage for a fling? Let some stranger ruin everything we've built together. I said, almost in tears. I never meant for this to happen. I didn't want to hurt you, she cried. I swear, I just felt so overwhelmed. But that's not good enough, Emily. Your choice was your own, I said. You could have stopped it at any time, but you kept lying and lying. I could see the guilt on her face as she cried, and the angrier I got, the more I wanted to forgive her. But I just couldn't. Mark, please, she started, but I cut her off. No, don't even try to ask for forgiveness right now, I said, getting up from my seat and pacing the room. It was so silent between us, like the air was thick with unsaid words. How did things get so messed up? Emily reached out, her hand trembling as she touched my arm. Let's just talk about it, we can work it out, she said. I pulled away, feeling her touch, like a burning sensation on my skin. Love, that's what you think it is. Her sobs got louder, and she buried her face in her hands. I couldn't handle it anymore, I just needed some space to think. I'm going for a walk, I muttered, grabbing my coat and heading for the door. Emily ran after me, pleading, don't leave. We can figure this out. We can make it work. But I didn't listen. I was hurt and mad, and I couldn't deal with her right then. What's wrong? I asked, looking at her one last time. Nothing's wrong, Emily. We just don't work anymore. And with that, I walked out of the room and into the night. As I wandered through the dark hotel halls, my head was spinning. I felt numb and confused. I had no idea where to go or what to do next. All I knew is that I needed to escape the pain and uncertainty. The person I loved and trusted had let me down, and I needed space to process it all. My mind raced as I tried to make sense of it all. I felt alone and lost, with no one to turn to for support. But then, as I walked along the beach, I spotted a light in the distance, a small boat bobbing gently on the waves. Suddenly, I knew exactly what I needed to do. Start over, rediscover myself, and start anew. I found myself on the beach, watching the waves crash against the shore as the sun slowly set. It was a once romantic scene, but now it felt empty and fake. I sat in the sand, staring at the water, not sure how to go forward after my life of happiness seemed over. There was no going back. My life and marriage, which I thought were strong, were crumbling, leaving me lost and alone. I had no idea how to rebuild what had been destroyed. I was sitting on the beach, staring out at the endless ocean. The night breeze was cool, but I didn't really notice it. I was just trying to process everything that had happened with Emily. I couldn't believe how things had turned out. I don't know how much time had passed as I sat there thinking. When I finally got up, the resort was quiet. I walked back to our room, dreading what might be waiting for me. Part of me hoped Emily had left. Maybe she had packed up and gone, sparing us from having to face each other again after what she did. But when I opened the door, there she was, sitting on the bed, knees pulled up to her chest. Her eyes were red and puffy from crying. Normally, seeing her like that would have touched me. It would have awoken feelings of empathy and love. But all I felt was empty. Whatever love we had, it was buried under anger and hurt. Mark, she whispered when I walked in, her voice hoarse. Sorry, she said again. I just stood there, the door half closed behind me, not sure what to say back. Sorry felt so inadequate after what she'd done. What did it even mean? I don't know, Emily, I said. Do you think an I'm sorry will fix everything? Can we just pretend like it never happened? She shook her head, tears welling in her eyes, and admitted she didn't know either. I clenched my fists, trying to control my anger. "Stop saying that," I snapped. It wasn't a mistake. She made a choice to do it. She made 1,000 little choices to get to this point. Now, she's only sorry she got caught. Not that she feels bad for what she did. Her sobs filled the room again, and for a second, I wondered if maybe I'd been too hard on her. But then I remembered her texts, all the lies, and how she tried to hide stuff from me. Nah, it wasn't me being cruel. She totally deserved everything I'd said. "Do you even love me?" I asked, my anger turning to sadness. "Were you just using me until something better came along?" Emily looked up at me, pain in her eyes. "I do love you, Mark. I've never stopped loving you," she said. But then I had to ask, "Then why'd you do what you did? Why did you hurt me like that?" She shook her head. "I don't know. It's not about you and our relationship. It's just, I'm confused and I messed up." Her words felt empty, like they didn't mean anything. Maybe she was telling the truth, or maybe she was just making excuses because she didn't want to take responsibility for what she did. Either way, it didn't matter. Everything we'd built together was now in ruins. "I can't pretend like this never happened," I said firmly. "I know it's hard to move on, but I can't ignore it. You broke something between us, and I'm not sure if it can be fixed." Emily wiped her eyes, but didn't argue back. She knew I was right. The silence was heavy and uncomfortable. We both knew there was so much we needed to say, but neither of us knew where to start. The walls seemed to close in on us, suffocating us with the weight of unspoken words and pain. I couldn't stay in that room any longer. Suddenly, I grabbed my suitcase and said, "I'm leaving." Emily jumped up, looking scared. "Mark, please don't go. We can talk this out. We can work through this." But I just shook my head and walked out, leaving her behind. "There's no point in going over it, Em," I said, zipping up my bag. "You made your choice, and so did I." Her voice shook as she asked, "Where are you going?" "I'm not sure yet," I answered truthfully. "I need some space to think and get away from it all." She looked devastated, and for a second, I felt bad. But then I remembered everything she'd done. She had a choice too, and I was justified in being angry. I turned and walked away without looking back, breathing in the fresh night air as I headed down the hallway. I had no idea where I was headed, so I just kept walking. My mind was racing with thoughts. The beach was so peaceful, with the waves gently lapping at the shore. It felt like the same place where I had sat earlier, trying to figure out what to do with my life. Now it all seemed even more unreal. Was my marriage really crumbling before my eyes? I sat on a bench overlooking the ocean, my suitcase beside me. The resort seemed like a different world, a world I didn't feel like I belonged in anymore. As I stared at the water, memories flooded my mind, memories of our past together, good and bad, times that brought us joy and times that tested us. I thought about our wedding vows, how easily they had been broken. I had always dreamed of spending my golden years with Emily, building a life and raising a family together. But now I wasn't so sure about the future. I wasn't sure I could trust her anymore, and if there was no trust, what did we have? Hours passed as I sat there, lost in thought, when I heard footsteps approaching. I didn't turn to look, not wanting to see anyone, and then I heard her voice. "Mark," she said, her voice soft and gentle. It cut through me like a knife, reminding me of everything we'd been through. "I'm so sorry," she went on, her voice full of pain. "I don't know how to fix this. I just need you to know that I'm here for you." She broke down then, her words coming out in a rush. "Please don't leave me. I know I messed up, but I love you, Mark. I need you." Finally, I turned to face her, my expression hard. "What do you want me to do?" I asked. "Forget everything that happened and pretend it never happened? I can't do that." "I understand," she said quietly. "You're right. We can't just forget or pretend. But I need you here in my life. Please don't go." I stood there with my suitcase, not sure what to do. I felt like I had already lost her. So I turned and walked away, leaving her on the beach alone. I left the resort that night and didn't look back. Driving to the airport was a blur because my mind was too scattered and I couldn't focus on anything else except the weight of what had happened. I booked the first flight available, not caring where it was going as long as it got me away from that place and away from Emily. Sitting at the airport, I went over everything in my head. The anniversary trip we were supposed to make us closer, the excitement of planning it, and how I convinced myself that things would get better between us. It all seemed so naive now, like I was living in a fantasy, while the real world was crumbling around me. When my flight was called, I stood up and headed to the gate, leaving not only the vacation behind, but also the life and marriage I thought would last forever. It was suffocating being in reality, but I knew I had to move forward. Emily had made her choice, and it was time for me to make mine. The flight home was a long, quiet ride. I couldn't sleep, so I just stared out the window, watching the endless sky and clouds. It felt like I was in between two worlds, my old life and the unknown future. What do I do now? How do I pick up the pieces when everything I knew has shattered? I thought about calling someone, family or friends, but the thought of explaining everything just overwhelmed me. I didn't want to talk about it or relive the pain. All I wanted was to go home to a familiar place and clear my head. When I finally arrived, the city seemed strange and foreign to me. It was like the world had moved on while I was frozen in that nightmare. I flagged down a cab and gave the driver my address, staring out the window as we drove through familiar streets. Everything looked the same, but felt so different. The cab pulled up outside my house, and for a second, I hesitated. That house that Emily and I shared for so long felt like a reminder of our life together. I wasn't sure how I was going to go back inside, knowing everything had changed. Our life as I imagined it was no more, but I had to face it. I paid the cab driver and grabbed my suitcase, walking up to the front door. The house felt silent and creepy. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. The familiar smell of home hit me, but it was empty. Everywhere I looked, there were traces of Emily, her shoes by the door, her favorite blanket on the couch, our wedding photos on the wall. I stood there for ages, just staring at those pictures. Our smiling faces were frozen in time, oblivious to what was going to happen. I thought about taking them down and getting rid of them, but something stopped me. I wasn't ready to delete those memories yet, even though it felt like part of my past was over. I left my suitcase in the hall and collapsed on the couch in the living room. I was exhausted, both physically and mentally, and I just wanted to sink into the cushions and close my eyes. I wanted to cry or scream or feel something, but all I felt was emptiness. Days blurred together. I told my boss I was sick so I could take some time for myself, and spent those days thinking about everything. I went over every moment of the past few weeks in my mind, wondering how I missed the signs and how blind I was to what was in front of me. Emily kept texting me. All her messages were just variations of sorry or miss you, but I didn't feel like replying. What was the point? Her words felt empty, like all the promises she'd made during our marriage. A week after I got home, I was sitting on the porch watching the sunset. It was a beautiful mix of orange and pink, the kind of sunset Emily loved. I hadn't gone out much and hadn't spoken to anyone. I was just thinking about my future, and then it hit me. I realized that I couldn't stay stuck in the past, dwelling on the pain. Yeah, Emily cheated on me and our marriage is over, but I'm still here. I'm alive, and I can move on. I got up and headed back inside, straight for my room. There, I grabbed a few things that Emily had forgotten. Clothes, shoes, some personal stuff. I packed it all in a box by the door. I wasn't sure what to do with it. Maybe I'd take it to her place, or just throw it away. But I felt like it was a step towards moving on. The next day, I called the lawyer and started the divorce process. It was hard, but the right thing to do. There was no going back. Trust was broken, and without that, there was no basis for our relationship. I didn't want to spend the rest of my life worrying if she'd hurt me again. As the weeks went by, I slowly started to rebuild my life. I started going out again, reconnecting with friends, and even going back to work. While the pain didn't just go away overnight, it did get easier to deal with. I stopped defining myself by what happened to me and started seeing myself as a person who has a future ahead, even if it's not the one I originally planned. A few months after that, I found myself back at the park where Emily and I would go on weekends. Sitting there on a bench, watching families and couples walk by, I felt at peace for the first time in ages. The betrayal hurt more than I could have imagined, and it took time to get over it. But as I sat there, I realized life just keeps going whether we're ready for it or not. I decided to leave that hurt and anger behind and move on. I didn't know exactly what the future held, but for the first time since then, I wasn't scared of it. If you like such stories, then be sure to subscribe to the channel. It will be the biggest support for me.